Hello, I'm Kimberly Meyer. I am the author of Murder at Constellation House, and today we are going to be doing a reading from later in the book. First of all, thank you so much for clicking the link and for seeing what I wrote. Okay, so we are going to have a reading of chapter 40, which is one of my favorite chapters in all of Murder at Constellation House, and it follows Jessica Greenleaf, who is one of the executive team members of a preservation society in Newport. There are two of them, and they really hate each other. So she is throwing a fundraiser at Marble House, which is a real mansion in Newport, and it's absolutely beautiful. I highly suggest going there, buying a ticket, going through. Gorgeous, gorgeous. And let's see what happens at her fundraiser. Okay, Chapter 40. Leaning on the balustrade of Marble House's back terrace, Jessica calmed herself by taking in the effect of the sunset's glow on the intricate pagoda roof of the Chinese tea house at the edge of the grounds. It was an inspiring tea house, built by Alva Vanderbilt Belmont to host suffragette events. The pink aura of the sunset beautifully contrasted with the jade green tiles of the tea house's roof. The bright green grass of the manicured lawn and the moody blue of the bay in the distance completed the spectacular view. It was an exceptional location, and Jessica felt proud to be part of the organization protecting it. Looks better without the flamingos, she thought testily. That morning, she had received a call that a few hundred plastic flamingos were tightly packed around the tea house. She had raced over and plucked pink flamingos out of the ground with a few volunteers, gawking at their hand-painted wraparound sunglasses as she tried to avoid the dirt from their wire legs. She wondered how much the bespoke flamingo flock had cost. There was no question in her mind that Finn was behind this flock. She wondered why he would pull a prank that would put a crimp in their plans for tonight, of all nights. Since the reception for Grant Travers, she had been giddy about their prospects. Now she had a bad feeling about it all. Annoyed that she couldn't figure Finn out, Jessica enjoyed the view for one last moment, then walked back inside the mansion to manage the final touches for the night's festivities. This is going to be a triumph, she thought, trying to muster enthusiasm. Marble House's glittering grand salon was abuzz with servers, double-checking place settings and filling water glasses. From the massive golden crystal chandeliers to the green silk and cut velvet window draping, the room was a masterpiece, covered in gold leaf but somehow warm and inviting. She was especially pleased by the white dinner and salad plates with "Votes for Women" emblazoned across them in royal blue cursive. Abby's team had gone above and beyond by making a modern interpretation of the suffragist dish set that Alva Vanderbilt Belmont had commissioned for use in her work, fighting for women to have the right to vote. The soft ruffles on Jessica's cobalt blue cocktail dress rustled against the backs of the dining chairs as she made her way to the hat pin exhibit set up in the Gothic room. It was a somber space, and contrasted starkly with the gaiety of the golden walls of the Grand Salon. She was proud of her team for not letting the floor-to-ceiling stained glass windows, crimson walls, and dark paneling overpower the hatpin exhibits. She surveyed the cocktail tables that were set up around the room with hatpins, photos, and cards detailing historical anecdotes. They were interesting and impeccably executed. Usually, such exquisite work would thrill her, but she couldn't shake the disappointment of those plastic flamingos. I may hate him for this, she decided, half-jokingly. As her last frivolous moment of the night, Jessica stared up at the ribbed ceiling, taking in the masterful craftsmanship. She thought about the remarkable life of the woman who brought that ceiling from Europe to the United States for her summer cottage. The haughty, square-jawed face of Alva Vanderbilt Belmont flashed to her mind. She wondered what today's media would make of that paradoxical icon of feminine strength. She guessed at some of the headlines they would print. "Suffragette millionaire keeps mansions and children in divorce scandal." "Doyen denied. Alva Vanderbilt shunned from high society after divorce." "Socialite forces daughter to wed Duke in successful bid to regain status." She puzzled over Alva's ability to be a fierce proponent of women having equal rights and cold enough to force her daughter into a loveless arranged marriage to return to the upper echelons of society. Hypocrisy is in vogue no matter the age, Jessica thought. Abby's fire-red curls and clipboard swished by. 15 minutes before our guests arrive. Everyone to their stations. She flashed a bright smile at Jessica. "You look smashing." Before Jessica could reply, she had disappeared into the grand salon. Jessica smoothed the tight waist of her dress and marched into the entrance hall to begin greeting the board members and guests. She was impressed by the way the extra lighting brought in by Abby's team made the buttery sienna marble of the vast two-story entrance hall glow. She knew tonight was going to be an epic success and tried again to feel her usual glee. Ike and the Admiral appeared out of nowhere, looking smart in their usual tuxedos, ready to shake hands and thank wealthy benefactors. Jessica's quick hellos with them were awkward. She was still fuming about the cut virtual tours. Kitty broke the ice for them all by grabbing Jessica's hands and telling her that someone was going to propose marriage once they saw her in that dress. "I should know," simpered Kitty as she pulled down the short feathered skirt of her orchid frock. "I still have the dress that made Ike propose to me." Ike grabbed a glass of white wine from a passing waiter and gulped it down. The trolleys began bringing guests to the circular drive. The board arrived first. Dr. Gyo Shinoda, with all smiles as she walked in, holding the arm of the formidable Bradley Gillenwater III. Gillenwater took in the urns of cabbage roses and hydrangea lining the grand staircase. "I'm sure we will at least recover costs tonight, Admiral," he asked pointedly. "We're just the architects of the event, working with the budget approved by our resident mathematician," the Admiral said playfully. Both Jessica and the Admiral turned to Ike. Ike openly gulped. Chairman Gillenwater, you have my word that this evening will be a jewel in the Guild's crown." Gillenwater harumphed. "We'll see." Dr. Shinoda had a quiet happiness about her as she greeted the executive team. At the first opportunity, she dashed into the Gothic room to see the final staging of her prized hatpin collection. Jessica accompanied her and enjoyed watching her drink in every detail of the arrangements and exhibit cards. "I have never been excited to give a speech before," Dr. Shinoda confided. Jessica spent the rest of the cocktail hour introducing Dr. Shinoda to notable guests and scanning the entrance hall for Finn. When Abby clapped her hands and instructed everyone to be seated, Jessica's heart sank. Finn hadn't arrived. What did I do wrong, she wondered sadly. It was hard to imagine what had changed so drastically in less than a day. Jessica sat down at her table and glanced at the empty seat next to her as she chatted with the other guests during the salad course. Some of the largest donors were sitting with her: Elliot and Teresa Sturbridge, the elderly Prescotts, and Thaddeus Robinson IV with his fifth wife, Amber. Amber was openly bored and played with the emerald and diamond cuff she was wearing instead of engaging old Mrs. Prescott in conversation. "You look lovely, my dear," Elliot said, openly admiring the off-the-shoulder cut of Jessica's dress. His wife, Teresa, shot him a look. "Careful, Jessica. Elliot will try to charm you aboard his yacht." The couple quickly glared at each other, and Elliot stabbed at his salad disgruntledly. Clearly pleased to get a rise from her husband, Teresa turned to old Mr. Prescott and chatted about the boxes of hatpins designed for a suitor to gift to his sweetheart. I so appreciate the social mores of the time," she purred. "There were such clear moral boundaries." Mr. Prescott took a swig of his wine. "Careful not to be too nostalgic. The man who built this house as a birthday gift to his wife had a mistress." Teresa looked furious, and Elliot looked smug. "Remember how much they give each year," Jessica thought sternly. She tried to draw attention away from them and turned to Amber. "Which display most caught your eye?" Amber looked up in surprise and glanced at her husband for guidance. Thaddeus gave her a dissatisfied look, as if he expected his trophy wife to disappoint him. Amber turned back to Jessica with a bit of panic in her eyes. "Oh, my stars! I can't decide between the delicate Limoges porcelain pins with the sweet Japanese tea scenes or the craftsmanship of the jewel-encrusted numbers. I suppose, historically speaking, the hatpins that doubled as weapons have to be the most interesting." She turned and smiled meekly at her husband. "What about you, honey?" Thaddeus beamed at his fifth bride and pecked her squarely on the mouth. Jessica was impressed. Amber would probably last far longer than the fourth Mrs. Thaddeus Robinson IV. That unlucky lady had been so drunk at last year's fundraiser that she had pulled the tablecloth out from an oil painting from the Hudson River School and cracked the frame. Thaddeus had been forced to fork over $40,000 to save face. Wonder who got the painting in the divorce. Her thoughts were interrupted by Ike stiffly walking up to the marble fireplace. His large jaw was set in a grimace of pain, and his brows were furrowed. From her seat, Jessica thought Ike looked distinctly pale. "Hope he doesn't pass out," she thought in alarm. He tried to smile, but it made the grimace worse. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Irving Stanley Carruthers. Ike to all of you, my friends." He smiled horribly again. "I am the Director of Finance for our proud organization." There was a pause as he looked at the delicately painted ceiling and back at them earnestly. It is my honor to lead us in a moment of silence for Grant Arthur Travers. Grant made a mark as the co-chair of our annual Golf Classic fundraiser. He was gregarious, generous, and a valued member of our community. Ike swallowed. He will be dearly missed, and our thoughts and prayers go to his family and friends, so please join me. Ike bowed his head and kept it there for a minute. When he faced them again, there were tear tracks on his cheeks. He held up his glass of white wine. To Grant Arthur Travers. A loud rumble sounded from the tables, and everyone drank deeply. The Admiral spoke next, marking each sentence of his generic greeting with a light tap of his cane. There is nothing more important than history, he said, pausing to make eye contact with a few guests around the room. A hubbub in the back caused the Admiral to make a strangled sound. Jessica turned, her heart sinking, as Finn walked in. He looked like a romantic lead in his sharply cut tuxedo and was leading a brassy blonde in a baby doll dress by the hand to Jessica's table, greeting acquaintances along the way. Abby and a waiter were following behind them with an extra place setting and chair. Abby looked serene, but Jessica knew she was furious that the unruly guests had interrupted her event. The grand salon had gone quiet as everyone waited for the Admiral to explode. Finn and his companion finally reached Jessica's table, and he gallantly held out the chair for the young lady. Jessica and the others scooched closer together so Abby and the server could quickly add a place. Apologies, Captain, Finn called out. No offense meant. I am looking forward to this evening's festivities, and thank you for your preservation efforts. He made a small bow to the Admiral before taking the newly minted seat next to Jessica. The Admiral cleared his throat, checked his note cards to find his place, stamped his cane, and started again. There is nothing more important than history. Besides punctuality. Ripples of laughter erupted around the room, and the Admiral found his groove again. Our motto at the Guild is prepare for our future by respecting our past, and tonight's event embodies that ideal. Dr. Shinoda has gamely let us showcase the history of her collection to raise funds for the future preservation projects needed to maintain these historic homes. Thank you, Dr. Shinoda. Now, without further ado, please enjoy your main course. Polite applause floated him back to his seat. Kitty patted his arm and whispered, Well done. Jessica sat stiffly in her chair, willing Finn to ignore her, but she had no such luck. Miss Greenleaf, you are a vision this evening, he said smoothly. Jessica turned her head against her will and locked eyes with him. Why, thank you, Mr. Myrick. Please introduce me to your date, she said, ignoring the feeling that she was a crush bug on Finn Myrick's windshield. Enchantée! I'm Tammy. The blonde held out her hand to Jessica, as if expecting her to kiss the back of it. Jessica awkwardly shook the hand and wished a trapdoor would open and swallow her. Finn fell into easy conversation with Elliot, and Tammy openly admired Amber's dazzling bracelet. How do I get one of those? She giggled saucily. Jessica tried to keep her cool. She was a professional at one of her biggest events of the year. This too shall pass, she thought, as she sternly told herself to get a grip. She tried to envision the rest of her evening and saw herself in bed surrounded by empty pints of ice cream. Relatively calmed, she turned back to Finn to have a mature conversation. Her resolution dissolved into outrage when she spotted a tiny pink flamingo wearing sunglasses on the lapel of his tuxedo. It was an exact replica of the one she had pulled out of the ground that morning. She nearly ripped it off him and threw it in his face. The swine isn't even a good preservationist, she fumed. Against her better judgment, she decided to dig at that facet of his character. So, Finn, when are you planning to approve Grace Clemson's internship? Grace had been an excellent intern for the Guild and wanted to write her thesis on the archive at the Trust. In Jessica's opinion, she was a rising star in the next generation of preservationists. Who? He asked politely. Oh, you must remember the young lady I brought with me for a tour of your office a few months ago, she said nonchalantly. He dramatically put his hand to his forehead. Oh, yes, bright thing, I remember. She pounced. I thought her proposal was excellent, and she is dying to get access to your archives, so how about it? Jessica inwardly groaned at the steeliness in her voice. He studied her for a moment. We disagree about her brilliance. She lacked the flair for the work. I'm afraid I'm going to have to reject her request. Jessica waited for the server to place the plate of pork roulade and risotto in front of her and flashed them a smile of thanks before turning back to Finn. I have to disagree with you. In my opinion, she is the best of the best. He took a sip of water. Agree to disagree. She tried to keep her cool, but felt it slipping like the straps of that baby doll dress. Not a single outside expert has been granted access to the Trust's archive, she said airily. I hope they actually exist. Finn smiled, clearly enjoying her consternation. As you have astutely pointed out, our dear patron frowned upon outsiders viewing his things. Perhaps it is more respectful to keep the archive private. Jessica was outraged by the flippant answer. Some in the preservation community would consider that negligence, she sniped. The others at the table were obviously trying to listen while continuing their own conversations. Finn leaned over and whispered, Is this how you treat your biggest donor? She smiled and replied in a normal volume, It's how I treat a fraud. Excuse me. Jessica was in shock as she stood up from the table, picked up her plate, and walked out of the grand salon. She made her way to the entrance hall, where Abby was stationed. Are you okay, Jessica? Abby stood up to let Jessica sit at the registration table to eat her dinner. Jessica looked at her mournfully. I let Finn Myrick get under my skin. Abby clicked on her headset and asked for a glass of red wine to be brought to them. Jessica smiled gratefully and dug into the delicious meal. He really is testing people this week, Abby said. I've never had so many last-minute changes to an event. She leaned in and whispered conspiratorially, and they're so tacky. Jessica laughed. I can't wait to hear all about it. When the server came to clear her plate, Jessica took a deep breath, walked back into the grand salon, and reclaimed her seat. She kept a serene smile on her face as Dr. Shinoda got up to give her speech. She caught the Admiral glaring at her and knew she would hear about her behavior on Monday. The room politely collapsed as Dr. Shinoda stood in front of the magnificent marble fireplace, pulled out her note cards, and thanked all the right people and organizations. The hat pins here tonight represent the changes that were undermining the social and class systems of the Gilded Age. When we talk about that period, we prefer to think about the beautiful mansions and incredible fortunes. We must not forget the gritty struggle under the glamorous facade for the soul of the middle class and enfranchisement of women. There are many beautiful hat pins to enjoy tonight, and I hope you do. The one I wish to highlight is the cutlass. Dr. Shinoda pulled a hat pin out of her updo and held up the foot-long piece of metal for the crowd to see. The top looked like the handle of a sword worthy of any swashbuckling pirate. She inserted it back into her bun. In the 1900s, women were able to move more freely in society. They got jobs during the industrial age and worked outside of the home to support their families. Unfortunately, not all men were comfortable seeing females on city streets, and they took advantage of their perceived vulnerability. The moniker of masher came into vogue to describe men who pressed themselves against women in public transportation or harassed them for dates. How was a lady to defend herself? She did so with a hat pin. If a male became fresh, she could pull a pointed hat pin from her hat and poke him. So many men needed to be poked that the lady's defensive weapon was deemed the hat pin peril. To her horror, Jessica watched Finn lean over and nibble Tammy's ear. She considered borrowing Dr. Shinoda's hat pin and poking him next to that stupid flamingo. The pen is mightier than the sword, she reasoned. Maybe she would write an exposé on the shoddy preservation practices taking place at the Trust. Slow down, she thought. Let's topple one chauvinist at a time. She glanced at the Admiral, who was clearly not paying attention, and promised herself that she would finish her letter to the board between pints of ice cream. The plan calmed her down a bit. No man was safe from a scratched face, and a few died from well-placed jabs. Because only men had the right to vote in 1910, cities such as Baltimore, Chicago, and New Orleans banned the longer pins to keep men safe despite the protests of their female peers. Knives and guns were still allowed, but not hat pins. In historical context, it was a rebuke to the suffragettes who were fighting impassionedly for the right to vote and run their own affairs. Women were becoming more outspoken, and it spooked the men who believed a woman's only place was in the kitchen. Despite these setbacks, hat pins remained determinedly in fashion and were a symbolic stronghold of personal liberty that women refused to give up on the road to the biggest liberty of all, obtaining the right to vote in 1920. As we enjoy this lovely room, we must remember how hard women and men have fought to bring better equality to the sexes. It is as important as ever to contemplate what we can do within our sphere of influence to make rights more equal for everyone in this great nation. Let's not forget, America truly became a power during the age of hat pins. Thank you so much for reveling in their historical significance with me tonight. Dr. Shinoda flushed with pleasure as she received a standing ovation. The Admiral kissed her on both cheeks and clapped along with the crowd as they continued their applause. He finally held his hands up for quiet. Thank you, Dr. Shinoda, for that excellent and wonderfully brief overview of the significance of hatpins. We invite you all to continue to enjoy the exhibits this evening, either during dessert or in the hour afterward. The Admiral called up the Director of Development, who began giving the pitch for more donations, while the decadent chocolate desserts were served. Jessica remained fastidiously in her seat to talk with the guests at her table, and hoped she had repaired some of the damage done by her dramatic dinner exit. I'm in hot water, she thought grimly, as Chairman Gillenwater walked by and eyed her disapprovingly. When the other members of her table got up to look at the exhibits and sip coffee, Jessica decided to hide for a moment to collect her thoughts. She sneaked into the cordoned-off, pink marble dining room to recenter herself. She drank in the beauty of the Versailles-inspired gilt fireplace and richly embroidered dining chairs with each deep, steadying breath. This too shall pass, she reminded herself. Gillenwater couldn't hate her forever, right? Ike startled her as he snuck under the rope to stand by her side. It's been a rough night for all of us, he said, with a commiserating smile. She was grateful for his kind presence. I meant it. He is a fraud, she confided genially. Ike chuckled. We all know it. They stood in companionable silence, taking in the beauty of the opulent room. Jessica felt oddly comforted standing next to Ike. She turned to ask him how he was holding up after Grant's death, but froze as the unexpected sound of laughter erupted from the far end of the dining room. Now, to find out whose laughter it was, and why that's significant, and how that really escalates what's going on, check out Murder at Constellation House. If you've gone through the whole reading, thank you so much. I don't have words. I'm so grateful. This is all new and scary and super fun for me, and I'm hoping it's fun for you. So you can find Murder at Constellation House on Amazon. There's a Kindle and a paperback version. You can also find me, author Kay Meyer, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I talk a lot about the characters and motivations and everything going on in the book, but I am also really interested in mystery in general and also spooky stuff. So I'm trying to write about other things and just have fun with it. Thank you again. Bye!